Hey there everyone, my name is Hitesh and welcome to this amazing video about how the browser works. This is a kind of a video which talks about the inner engineering side of the techs and the most common things that you're using, and I love to make these videos. Before that, a few disclaimers. This video is not your ordinary TikTok videos which just finishes up in 1 minute. These videos take time. And the beauty about these videos is the essence of teaching and understanding those points and getting those wow factor that, oh, this much happens behind the scene. Now I feel more good about the tech. So these are those kinds of videos. I don't edit these videos out because if I edit them out too much sharply, then it will remove the essence of teaching and getting that wow factor out of you. Again, this is not a Fireship video. He's a great channel, but if you want that fast-paced video, that's on his channel, not this one. This one is more about sit back, chill out, relax, enjoy. I know most people don't have patience these days for that, but this is that kind of a video where I actually walk you through with the patience, not just patience, but a lot of inner working of what things are happening. And that's exactly what I'll be doing in this video. So recently you appreciated a lot about the Node.js video. In case you haven't watched that, search it on the channel. That also talks about what happens in the inner side of Node.js. In this video, I'll walk you through what happens in the inner side of browser. This will not only help you to understand, but also appreciate the technicalities that happens behind HTML, CSS, JavaScript, even React, and you'll be able to mark yourself a better developer because you understand what's happening and how the things can be made more performant optimized if you know this much of inner details. Not only that, we'll also talk a little bit about CSS and the C++, how they are interrelated, because HTML is one of the fascinating things. I'll make you that fascinating thing. I'll share that with you as well. I'll also discuss briefly about what the browser is and how you should approach the browser side of it and little details. Okay, enough of that. Let's go ahead and start the journey. First, I really think that people need to appreciate more about what HTML is and what really HTML is and how much impressive this is. A lot of people think that because I'm writing HTML, just I'm saving a document with the .html extension and I'm writing an h1 tag or p tag, and that's how a text is being displayed on my web browser. I think you couldn't be much more wrong than this. HTML is a no powerful programming language. Even the internet can debate itself about that it's not even a programming language. If HTML is not even a programming language, when did we give it so much of power that it can come into your browser, which is in itself an operating system, almost a full-blown operating system, and it can render the entire pixels for me? Like, don't you find it fascinating? It has no memory control. It cannot control your processors, your LEDs, and still this small language can display just a text on the screen itself. When did this language got so much of power? The truth is, no, this language didn't got that power, but technicalities are that you never write HTML. HTML is just a parser on top of CSS that you write, and that CSS is still responsible, C++ is responsible for rendering out the elements. I'll walk you through what that is, because that's a really long and a bold statement to put out on the internet, that technically you don't ever write HTML. Yes, you write HTML, but that's actually an abstraction layer on top of it. In the real world engineering, still those hard languages, hardcore languages like C++ and all of them work behind the scene. So this is already fascinating to me. I'll walk you through with that. First, let's understand the browser part of it, because that's where you will be finding a lot of things in much more details about how that is. First of all, stop looking browser as just piece of software. That's not the case anymore. Browser is far more of an operating system these days. It's a full-blown system these days. It would not be wrong to call it as almost an operating system these days. Yeah, it's that powerful. It has so much more capabilities. In fact, I'd like to walk you through with some of the capabilities of how that actually goes. So let me share my screen with the iPad, our always trusty iPad, to actually show you the details and what the descriptions are. So I'll just go ahead and start my browsers up here. Just give me a second and we'll load this up. Should have already loaded that up. But anyways, shouldn't be that much of the time. It's going to take, there we go, hopefully. Okay, so we are on this browser, behind the scene details of it. So let me first walk you through what the browser is. These days, if you want to really understand the browser, always take this big picture with you, that if we are talking about the browser, Let's just assume this big thing is your browser. All right. The first and major portion of your browser is actually kind of consumed in this portion. So this portion is majorly your data portion, or you can say data persistent portion. Now, data is different types in the browser itself. It could be your cookies, it could be your local storage. These days, even you can hold your JavaScripts directly into here, save it and run it all the time. So all the data that you see actually goes in here. So that's your data portion of it. Now, on the very top of this model, actually, this is the layer where you see most of the things. And this is the part where most of your interaction will happen, and you are going to see your UI, or majorly whatever you see, or the interface is actually what you see here. So this is your interface. So all those beautiful videos that you see, the images, the text that you see, this is the layer only which you interact. But behind the scene, there is a ton of thing that goes around onto this one. One major portion of it that actually constitutes of all of the things is actually this one. So if I go ahead and work on with this one is actually your browser engine. Now, this browser engine is obviously different, but don't get into the debate of how the browser engine is different. It might be different for Chrome, for Safari, but ultimately their core working is mostly the same. It was never changed. All these people have adapted different versions of it, but in reality, the core working part, they cannot change it. Otherwise, the entire internet will get changed. So the browser engines are mostly the same. These are the engines which does a lot of magic for you. I'll walk you through this. The video is all about getting through the magic. The browser engine is actually divided into the two portion of it. You can say two portion of it, or you can say two part of it. The first portion is all about rendering. And that's where majority of the magic is, and that's where we'll be talking majority of it. The other part of it is your JS engine, and this is what you see majorly on the internet, like your V8 engines and Dnos and Node and whatnot. They are all that kind of a thing. So your JS engine is that part. We are not going to be focusing in this video, especially the JS engine part. Probably we can talk about it later on some other videos or something. Right now, I'm more concerned about rendering engine, because this is the guy which is responsible for your HTML and CSS and even a little bit of your JS part and its optimization as well. So yeah, there's a lot that is happening. We'll talk more about this one. But most of the people just are aware of this. There is a lot more in the browser part. One thing which actually fascinates me all the time is the network part of it. Browsers are so much capable of networking, not from now, from the day one. Browser are a software which helps you to talk to internet, loads your HTML file, loads your CSS file from the remote server and displays them. They need to have remarkable networking capabilities. The more you are going to learn about the browser, in reality, you will be able to understand more about the networking capabilities of the browser. So that's one portion of it. Now, not only this, there is a lot more information that goes in the browser. Like, for example, there are actually timers in the browsers as well, which help you to do a lot of things. In reality, your JavaScript engines or your core JavaScript don't have any timers. But hey, Hitesh, how do we use set timer, set timeout, set interval, and all these methods? You are able to use these methods because these methods are actually being borrowed via an API from the browser itself. If you use them in the core Node, Node also has an implementation of these timers into the Node engine itself. That's why you're able to use this. So that's already very fascinating to me. I don't know about you, but yeah, really for me. So we'll definitely discuss about this networking part, but this is how you should look at the browser now. So much capabilities. What less it is from an operating system. It has its own timers, just like your operating system. Networking capabilities. Doesn't have its own NIC card, but hey, it has networking capabilities. It can store the data, access the data, have its own memory. Obviously, this data part also is divided into the memory part. That's also given. It has its rendering capability, JavaScript engine, browser engine, and a UI interface. Like, what more is there to constitute it and call it as an operating system? Yeah, that's already fascinating. But now let me walk you through. This was just a prerequisite part for this video. Yeah, that's where things get interesting. That's where I love most about it. Now let's go ahead and talk about the major portion of the video which is going to help you to understand the HTML portion of it. So the whole idea is that, just tell me one thing, that how does a browser loads an HTML and display a text on your screen? That is all we are going to understand in this entire video. Yes, you might think that, hey, that's a very easy thing, but no. You need to actually take a moment, pause in there, and understand, hey, there's a lot that is going on in this system. And let me remind you, I won't be writing the code for it, but go on to the Wikipedia and just write a simple code into your JavaScript console. Document.getElement by name, and just write h2 there. What the response you'll get are not all the h2s or not all the arrays of h2, but rather you actually get a node list. Yeah, how does that happen? So on the Wikipedia or any page, whenever we get that, we always and always come back with this node list. We never write HTML in the node list format. It's never is there. It's always p tag, h tag, and all those tags. So there must be somebody who actually converts my tags into the node list. Yes, that is exactly where this guy rendering engine comes to the picture. And most of the engines are written in C++. So yeah, technically you're writing HTML, but end of the day, it is being understood only by the C++ first. And that's why I say you're writing HTML, but it's not going in the HTML format. It's actually going into the C++ format. So let's understand the journey of how an HTML works. That's already fascinating. So couple of steps that you need to understand. The first step of any browser actually to work is to simply go ahead and load a file. Now, this might include the capability of the local storage or from networking, but in the browser, the way how it is being written is always about load everything from network. So even your computer is almost considered as there's another computer. Instead of the browser treats it as a computer and it loads at that file. So your computer, other people's network computer doesn't really matter. The whole idea is to load file. But there are a couple of things you need to understand this. The job of a browser is actually very simple, is to display the data. That is your first point. And the second point is to allow you the ability to interact with it. And these are complex applications. By the display, I really mean to say that you'll see the image first, then a heading first, and then a button. And the ability to track those interactions that I clicked on the image or the text or the button, this is where the complex part starts. But the display part is equally complex. So let me walk you through with that one by one, that how this actually goes up here. And again, the majority of the work is actually done by the browser rendering engine. The step one, okay, how you might think that your browser will be able to load it. When browser loads any file, or even any engine loads any file, what it sees is just the raw data. So simply go ahead and raw bytes. That's all it is. So go ahead and check it out. Hey, raw bytes? What do you mean by raw bytes? Yeah, raw bytes. That's how computer stores your data, zeros and ones. It doesn't understand. You have saved the file in the HTML format. You have written some characters into it. Computer doesn't understand it. So the step one is always to get the raw bytes. That's how all the computer program works. Once those raw bytes are there, then the step two is to convert these raw bytes into a sequence of character. Yeah, that's where the conversion of the character happens. And this is where actually you tell your file that, or in your HTML, you define that, hey, my character sequence should be UTF-8, or there is always a default, but you tell them that the characters in which you should convert my raw bytes is in Chinese, is in Japanese. No, Chinese is not a good word. It should be Mandarin, but you get the point. So it should be Mandarin, it should be Japanese, it should be Hindi, it should be English. So those character sequence, you have to tell it. And that's why I say it's really an important information to give the browser to actually understand that how this is happening. So that's the step one, and that's your character encoding of the HTML file. And again, this is something interesting. Once this character sequence is done, every single programming language does this, and HTML is no exception in that. Yeah, that's why a lot of people debate that is it a programming language or not. Then the next step is to generate token out of it, or the process in detail is known as tokenization. This tokenization means that there are some words that I need to pick it up. From a programming language perspective, it's like selecting the words like if, else, for, while, and similarly in the world of tokenization of characters, it actually picks out all the words. Like for example, when you say H1, when you say paragraph, when you say HTML, when you say body, all these things are actually taken up separately in the memory. That's your process of tokenization. That's always the step one. Okay, loaded the file, converted into raw bytes. That's why it was saved on the disk, then converted into character based on the UTF information that you have shared with me. Then I have converted into tokenization. What happens after the tokenization? Okay, that's where the things get interesting, because after the tokenization, a couple of things you need to understand, and you will get a lot of information out of it as well. What is your HTML? Your HTML is a document. That's how computer terminologies talks to it. Okay, that's one thing, because you will be understanding something really important with this. So just keep that in mind. I'll keep it in the green pen that, hey, there is a document, we call it a, that's it. Okay, next up is that once we have done the tokenization, we need to put a structure around it. Just like when you save any data in your Excel sheet or your database, you need to create a structure out of it. If you don't have a structure, we really can't do much. So a big object, yes, literally a big object is created out of these tokens. And there's a lot of information in these tokens about each entity. For example, when you say just h1 tag, so first of all, it says, hey, what tag it is. So it says, hey, it is an h1 tag. Does it have any title into it? Because, hey, you can put some parameters there, props, properties. So it has a title. So it says, hey, title is sum. It says sum into that. Does it have any data inside it? So then it says data, or sometimes it's known as value. What's the value inside it? So value is some title or maybe some company name like YouTube. So something is like that. So a whole object is actually created out of it. And there is a proper structure how this object needs to be there. So every single entity, now imagine this was done for H1, a similar kind of object will be done for paragraph, a similar kind of object will be done for body. Yeah, that's a long process. Can't help you in that. It's really a long process. So everything is actually converted into object, and that's where our next terminology comes up into that. So everything was converted into an object. Yeah, literal object. But having these objects scattered around through the places is not really useful at all, even tiny bit useful. We need to arrange them with proper relation. For example, somebody needs to be a sibling, somebody needs to be a parent. There's a lot of things that needs to go around. And that conversion of these objects into a structure, that's what we called as model. And that's where your term actually came into the picture, document object model. So you're writing a lot of gibberish into the document. We are extracting information out of it, tokenizing it, converting them into an object, and then preparing a model out of it. That's your document object model. Literally, that's how the term actually came into the picture. All right, so a lot of things. Now the tokenization has done and all of that. Now, okay. What's the next step? Because we know how the terms actually came up, but this is not yet displayed on the screen. We need to establish a relation between them. So the next step is, we are on the white pen, not this one. We are on the white pen. So after this, a relation is actually being portrayed. So once this relation is done, now that I know which one is a parent, which one is a sibling, grandchild, and all of that, then the next step, and the most important step, is actually to convert it into nodes or a node list. Yes, a node list is converted, because now in this list, you actually know that how the things are there. So that's what the whole idea is. So for example, into this node list, if you go ahead and say that, hey, I have, for example, an HTML. This is my HTML. This will have a list. Inside this list, or just bottom this list, I will have a body. There are other things as well, but here I'll have an H1. Here I will have an H2. So these are siblings. So these kinds of relation or nodes are being generated, and these are lists of node. And this lists of node, yes, this is exactly being given to you by this rendering engine. That's the job of it. It's not yet painted on the screen. Yes, this has not been done yet. So far into the video, and hey Tesh, we haven't done a single thing on the browser screen. Yes, that's why I say these videos cannot be TikTok videos. These are so long of a video. So notice here, we have done with this, a node list is being generated, but that's not being painted yet. I'll walk you through with the painting process of it, the rendering process of it, but this is all done and is kept separate, and this is called as your DOM generation. So out of this, your node list is generated, and that's why you see that whenever you try to access from your JavaScript all the HTML page, the node list is given to you back, because that's what it is actually going on the web page itself, not your HTML. And that's where the node list actually comes into the picture. And technicality, now we have a DOM in front of us. Just having a DOM doesn't mean we have something on the screen itself. That means there is in the memory, a document object model is ready. But what next? There's so much more to it. So let me go ahead and work on with that. Okay, so the DOM is being created. I'm actually having a notes and all these things so that I don't get myself, or I don't find anything that I've missed or something. So I prepared it. So again, I'm not talking out of my mind. I have structured it already. All right. Okay. Now, coming up onto the next thing, which is again a crazy thing in itself altogether. We'll go with the yellow pen. Okay, next up is, hey Tesh, okay, we understand the HTML part. What about the CSS part? Yeah, that is even a little bit more crucial, because once actually you have the CSS, it's actually not easy to go with that, because the entire raw byte, the format is going to remain the same. We have the raw data. From the raw data, you actually go ahead and do a character conversion to it as well. So there is no difference into it. Once the character conversion is done, the same process will happen. Just like we saw it here, raw byte, character conversion, the same thing. The tokenization will happen here as well. Okay. Once the tokenization happens here, we also create a structure out of it. So literally objects are created out of it. So again, the objects are created out of it. And this time we know that we are actually working on CSS. So out of the CSS, now objects are being created, and obviously these objects need to have some relation as well. So further down, relations are being set up. Now this time relation is actually a little different. I'll talk about that as well. But yes, the relations are being created. And further, a model is being established that how this should all portray the things. I'll talk about that, don't you worry. But this is exactly how your another keyword comes up, which you find so many times in the interview, which is CSSOM, CSS object model. So it's a document object model, CSS object model. There's a lot more others as well. But that's the basic idea about it. All right, so moving further. So we have seen that, okay, somehow our document object model is ready. Our CSS object model is also ready. Can now we go ahead and paint the picture on the web? No, you cannot. What happens in the behind the scene details of it, that when you simply go ahead and do all of these things, the moment browser sees or loads an HTML file, it will start working on its DOM, the document object model. But the moment it sees a link to your CSS, it also is going to start simultaneously, or you can say parallelly, going to work with the CSS object model. But these two things are completely independent of each other. They have no idea of each other as of now. There are some rules that how we are going to establish the relation in it. Yes, these rules are there, these relation information are there, but they're not talking to each other yet. Okay, moving on further. That's where a new concept comes up, which is known as render tree. Yeah, there is another tree that comes up. This tree is known as with a lot of other names in different books, resources, articles, but hey, there is something known as render tree, which is generated in this step now. So what happens in the render tree is it gathers the information. What are the information that we have? Yes, we have the DOM. Yes, we have the CSS OM. So all these information are collected and are given to the browser engine. So yes, your browser engine. Now your browser engine is a smart guy with the maths. Yeah. After this process, and in the render tree, you can say a lot of mathematical calculation is done, because your browser is 100% of the time aware that how much real estate of the screen it has, smaller one, bigger one, and all of that. And it needs to do calculation, because the DOM is okay, great. We need to have first this, second this, third this. But the CSS actually manipulates a lot of space on the screen itself, that it should be 10 pixel wide, it should be 100 pixel wide, the image should be 20%, 30%. You do a lot of mathematical calculation, and all these calculation is done almost instantaneously by the browser engine. So powerful. And that's where you finally get your rendering tree. Yeah. And this is exactly the moment where actually your painting starts. And what do you mean by painting? See, in the technicalities or the technical terms or the jargons, whenever there is a web page being rendered on the browser to see it, that's what we call as painting. And this is the most interesting and the important part, that, hey, now finally the painting starts. Now comes the most interesting thing. Okay, painting is done and we see all the data on our browser. So let's just say this was an image, this was your text, here it was your text, and here it was your image. So everything is great. All right, quite a lot of information, but what about the JS part? We haven't talked about it. What happened to the JavaScript? Here's an interesting thing about the JavaScript, and a lot of people don't like it. And especially this will help you to understand a lot of things. The moment browser sees a script tag, it will stop doing everything. That's not a script actually. I just need to write it better. All right. Okay. So let's go ahead and write a script. The moment your browser sees a script tag, no matter where it sees, it will stop executing the DOM, CSSOM, and whatever the work it's doing. The first preference always go that, hey, there's a JavaScript. So JavaScript has the capability of manipulating my DOM. It has the capability of manipulating my CSS as well. So what's the point of rendering the entire thing if JavaScript is going to manipulate that? So browser first collect all the information from the JavaScript and then go ahead and do the rendering part of it. And that's why you see and hear the words like hydration, because hey, we'll pass on the JavaScript at the very end in some of the frameworks, latest ones like Remix and all of that. And one of the problem which everybody faced in the React was, hey, first and foremost, all the JavaScript is shipped to the browser. That means nobody will be able to see the website unless all the JavaScript is being shipped. Because once it's shipped, browser will do it immediate calculation and will portray the picture. But the idea should be that first and foremost, the priority should be that HTML, CSS should reach to the browser so that it start doing the painting work. And at the end of it, the JavaScript should reach to it so that now we can track the interactivity part of it. That's interesting. But there is even one more interesting part on top of this. Okay, here comes the most interesting part. Notice I have talked about the relation between the JS and the DOM, and we know that if your DOM is there and even somebody encrypts a script tag, that means your DOM execution will be halted until your JavaScript execution or its reading part is complete. But there's another side of it. What happens with the CSS OM and the JavaScript? And here comes the crazy part. This is a little bit hard to believe. All right, so the part we are talking about is what happens if the CSS OM is not yet ready and we have hit the JavaScript tag. Yeah, this is where I want to bring your attention, that your JavaScript execution will be halted. A lot of people think that, hey, no matter what happens, your JavaScript execution will not stop. It always gets the priority, but no. Your CSS OM even gets more priority, and even your JavaScript execution is going to get halted unless your CSS OM is ready. So yeah, there's a lot of things that's going on. So first of all, your document object model, if it hits before building the entire DOM, it hits the JavaScript, it's going to say, hey, first I'm going to take care of the JavaScript. And even if it hits at that time as CSS OM, it's going to say, hey, you know what, I'll stop everything. So yes, CSS can be sometime a bottleneck to actually increase the performance of your application. Now this portion is changing drastically with the libraries and frameworks. We are trying to push and a lot of details that DOM should be priority, then the CSS should be priority, and JavaScript should be last, and a whole bunch of other things. This portion is debatable. A lot of details and talks and research is needed on that. I'm still doing that to actually properly understand this. But yeah, this is what I've found about all the documents I've read, the blogs I've read, and trying to understand the browser working as well. But yes, there's a crazy. Now, there is also one more thing you will hear about this one is deferring the JavaScript. So by default, whatever you do in the world of JavaScript, they are not deferred. But you can actually use the keywords like async, which actually helps you to defer your JavaScript and load it at the very end of the page, although it might be marked at the top of the page. But yes, you actually are able to understand this now, that I can mark my JavaScript as async, load that script at the very end. This whole thing I'm doing because I know how the painting is entirely being done. So yes, it's a really long detail, and yes, the video is really long, but these kinds of videos actually make more sense when you actually in-person learning. I'm trying to just mimic that in this video format as well. In the live classes, it goes really well, but I don't know if you like these kinds of long, in-depth detailed videos. Should I make them more or not? I'm not sure. Based on your feedback, actually, I make them. So I hope you understood this part. There was a lot of inner details about how the browser works, the inner detail. Hope it helped you to understand a little bit about the HTML part, the CSS part, the rendering part, how actually C++ engine takes your HTML and portrays the pixels on the screen and whatnot details. Probably in some another video, we'll take the JavaScript rendering part. We'll actually go into the source code of the V8 engine. We'll pick out some details and we'll see that how JavaScript is actually tokenized and being concerned with that and whatnot. So this is all the details that I wanted to share in this video. If you have enjoyed it, please do share. I am only working based on the feedback of the video and the comment section, that if you want more such videos, or should I stop talking those 1 hour, 2 hour long videos and focus on just the tutorial part of it. So just let me know and I'll work accordingly. All right, that's it for this video. Hit that subscribe and I'll surely catch you up in the next video.